So you're converting your IRA money over to Roth IRA.
Correct.
And do you feel like you're doing that right now because taxes are on sale compared to where they'll be in the future?
Well, you can say on sale, I'm saying lower. Words matter.
They do. They do.
Never consider taxes to be on sale. It's not exactly something that I wanted to do. It's something that I had to do.
And I agree with you. It's, when's the best time to pay taxes? And it's when the least amount of taxes possible you can pay, right? At the lowest rates. Welcome to Redefine Retirement with Ryan Wheless, powered by Allied Wealth. This podcast explores how to live a limitless life of abundance in retirement with clarity, purpose, and confidence. Welcome to Redefine Retirement with Ryan Wheless. This episode today may be the greatest episode we've done thus far, folks, on the podcast. I've got none other than the former Comptroller General of the United States of America, David Walker. He served as Comptroller General under President Reagan, President Bush, and President Clinton. And the guy has forgotten more about fiscal responsibility in this country than anybody else will ever know. He's here to talk about the government, the spending, the debt, the collapse, the debt crisis, taxation, Social Security, well-being, Medicare well-being. Please welcome to the show, Dave Walker. So, David, I want to start out with this. I know that you served as Comptroller General of the United States of America under both President Clinton and President Bush, and unanimously voted back in by both Democratic and Republican parties at both times as Comptroller General. What does a Comptroller General do?
Well, the Comptroller General is, in English, the Auditor General of the United States, the Chief Accountability Officer of the United States, and the Chief Executive Officer of something called the U.S. Government Accountability Office, which is a legislative branch agency which helps the Congress oversee the executive branch for the benefit of the American people. And it's focused on trying to maximize performance and assure accountability of the federal government for the benefit of the American people. It does oversight, insight, and foresight work. And very importantly, when I left, we were generating over $100 return for every dollar invested in the agency. Number one in the world. Nobody is even close.
Wow. That is a big change. That's a big change. So you've been sounding the alarm on our debt, and this is something that keeps me up at night as well, because if you look at it, I think we're going an additional $1 trillion in debt every 120 days right now is the pace that we're on.
It's about $2 trillion a year. Okay. But that's only the new debt. We have to refinance existing debt of trillions of dollars a year, which obviously is a matter of concern because there's now a reduced appetite to buy our debt. And yet we're trying to finance more debt, which means there's going to be pressure for the rates to go up if we don't end up putting our finances in order and providing the people who purchase our debt more confidence in our ability to restore fiscal sanity and sustainability.
Now, wait a minute. We got a president in office, like you or not,
right,
that is demanding the Fed cut rates, and in fact, trying to get rid of Powell right now to put somebody in there. He's doing a vetting process similar to the Apprentice show for the next Fed chair to cut rates. But you're saying if we don't get our house in order, rates have to go up. Help our listeners understand.
It's called the market. Okay. You have to keep in mind that, we sell our debt on the open market, right? There have been two major exceptions to that where the Fed was involved. When we had the housing crisis, earlier in this millennium, the Fed ended up buying several $1 trillion worth of debt. When we ended up having the COVID pandemic, in more recent years, the Fed bought much more of our debt rather than going to the market and having to pay market rates. So we were basically self-dealing in our own debt. The Fed's in a tough spot. The Fed has really three things that it's supposed to do. Number one, it's supposed to promote macroeconomic growth. I'm all for that. That makes sense. Secondly, it's supposed to try to be able to tame inflation and its target is 2% inflation, if you will, and we're above that now. Okay, and we were way above that in June of 22. We were 9.1%. And thirdly, they're supposed to try to maximize employment. All right. My personal view is they've got no business being involved in the last factor. They should focus on promoting economic growth and reasonable inflation levels. Okay. Because the issues with regard to employment really don't have that much to do with the Fed. They have to do with education policy, immigration policy, tax policy, regulatory policy, labor policy, and the Fed has nothing to do with that. That's all the executive branch and the legislative branch. And so clearly the Fed waited too long, okay, to raise interest rates when inflation was going up. And some people would argue that it's waiting too long to lower interest rates now that inflation has moderated, but inflation is still in excess of its target. And the jury's out on how things are going to end up with regard to things like, the appropriations bill after the shutdown, the tariffs, whether and to what extent the Supreme Court is going to uphold a lot of these tariffs that Trump has unilaterally imposed rather than through negotiations. So we'll see. Time will tell.
It really is interesting times, and it's going to be fascinating what the Supreme Court does on their tariff ruling, which is coming out very soon, by the way, as you know. Let me ask you this, David. I mean, you know this better than anybody. You go to usdebtclock.org. We've all seen the clock just ticking and ticking and ticking. Is it too late? Are we screwed?
It's not too late, but time is getting short and time is not on our side. And I'm actually working on a number of initiatives. Plan A, I would say, is what do we need to do to avoid a debt crisis, which would be a crisis of confidence in our ability to put our finances in order, a failed debt auction, and what kinds of things would we have to do in the event of that. So first thing I want to do is what can we do to avoid that? Because ultimately that could result in a global depression, and that's not something that anybody should ever want to see. I think there's two things we have to do there. Number one, we need a constitutional amendment that will limit how much debt as a percentage that we can take on absent limited and extraordinary and unexpected circumstances. I'm working on an effort to make that happen. The states are going to have to take the lead because the Congress is not going to do it under Article 5 of the Constitution. Secondly, we need a statutory fiscal sustainability commission that will engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, solicit input, set the table for a tough vote by Congress on spending and revenue adjustments. I just saw Simpson-Bowles this morning. You probably remember the Simpson-Bowles Commission. They did good work, but it was not set up for success, so we need to learn the lessons from that. So that's plan A. We need to do those two things to avoid a crisis of confidence and a debt crisis. But if we don't, because Congress is very adept at doing nothing, as evidenced by the fact they can't even pass annual appropriations bills when that's the only express and enumerated responsibility they have under the Constitution every year. We've had 21 shutdowns since 1980 because Congress has not been doing its job, no matter whether the Democrats or Republicans are in charge. We need to be prepared with what I would call a plan B. What are some of the things that we should do very quickly if we do have a debt crisis because of Congress's failure to act? And again, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we implement plan A. But, given Congress's track record, especially at the present time, we need to have a plan B as well.
Yeah, it's pretty unprecedented times. I mean, I'm a young man. I'm 48 years of age. My wealth is denominated in U.S. dollars, as I'm sure yours is too. And it's a real threat because, and I deal with this all the time with clients, especially if you look at the gold markets today. I quite frankly think gold should have hit where it's at today years ago because of the impending debt.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's gone down significantly in the last 2 days. But
I've seen that too.
I started diversifying into gold and silver, fortunately, earlier this year rather than just the last 2 days. But go ahead.
Well, interestingly enough, the head of Bank of America's investment committee has got a $6,000 price target on gold in the next 18 months. So I do think the trend is still lower left to upper right. And I do think that's largely because of what's going on in the world and the concern about, currency risk and debt and that sort of thing. But David, what happens here, man? I mean, we talk about and I can get into this in a couple of ways, but a debt crisis. I mean, what would a debt crisis? Let's say that the poo-poo hits the fan blade, right? What does a debt crisis look like?
Well, first, I think the most likely scenario for a debt crisis would be a failed debt auction. In other words, we're trying to finance not only our deficits, but we're trying to refinance a lot of the debt that has matured. And you find out that there are not enough people that want to be able to buy our debt at reasonable interest rates. And therefore, what happens in the short term is the Fed turns to banks to try to get them to buy some of it. The Fed buys some of it, but that doesn't solve the problem. That's just putting a Band-Aid on cancer. And so therefore, you have to end up taking some fairly dramatic steps. Some of the things that logically would be considered would be you would have an immediate tax surcharge. You would have an immediate across-the-board cut in spending. You might end up not indexing not only tax rates, but also tax brackets, but also Social Security and other benefits that are indexed to inflation. Okay. But, that wouldn't be enough. I mean, that wouldn't be enough to restore confidence. You would have to end up making a lot more changes dealing with the true drivers of our deficits. 74% of spending for the federal budget, we've written a blank check. It's deemed to be mandatory spending. What they're arguing over now is only 26% of spending. All right. It includes some important things: national defense, homeland security, federal judicial system, but it's only 26% of the budget and declining. So we're going to have to reform our social insurance programs. We're going to have to reprioritize and reduce discretionary spending. We're going to have to generate more revenues through taxation. We can debate how best to do it, but we're taxing below the post-World War II average. We're spending well above the post-World War II average. So we need more spending reductions and revenue increases, but we're going to need both. And the sooner we do it, the better. So the power of compounding starts working for us rather than against us as it is now. And now we face both Social Security and Medicare hospital funds go dry in 2032. And if something doesn't happen, by law, you get a 24% cut in Social Security benefits across the board in 2032. We can't allow that to happen, but we need to solve it sooner rather than later. And you get a 10 to 15% cut in Medicare Part A payments, in the same time frame. Those are just unacceptable outcomes. But again, we need to start doing something about it. We need to do it sooner rather than later.
It really is a detriment too. It's a theft for the people because you've paid for Medicare Part A and Social Security benefits your whole working career. I'm doing the same thing, right? Any of my clients are doing the same thing. And if they don't get the benefits they paid for, it's theft. I mean, it's just flat out the way it is, right? So
the other
you had go ahead.
We have things that we call trust funds. They're not trust funds because real trust funds are separate and distinct legal entities with fiduciary responsibility and liability that are managed for the exclusive benefit of the participants and beneficiaries. That's not what we have. What we have are accounting devices that by law have to invest in U.S. government securities. And we've talked about concerns about U.S. government securities.
So on that, what about the concern of the dollar collapse and the no longer being the reserve currency of the world? You hear a lot of the gold bugs talk about this.
Well, we are at present, the U.S. dollar represents 60% roughly, maybe a little bit less now of currency reserves. I don't think we're ever going to lose reserve currency status. I do, however, believe we're going to lose market share because we have been abusing our status as the world's leading reserve currency. No country is exempt from the laws of prudent finance. If you can't put your finances in order, you're going to lose confidence gradually and then suddenly. Right now, we're losing it gradually. You've seen the decline of the dollar, an increase in gold and silver. You've seen groups like, you've seen groups, trying to look at alternatives to the dollar. But by being the world's leading reserve currency, it gives us three key advantages. We can borrow at lower rates, we can trade more favorably, and we can impose economic sanctions on bad actors. All right. So first, we're going to lose some of our some of our advantages slowly. But then if we have a debt crisis, you lose it suddenly. Lots of signals going off saying, right now they're yellow flashing signs. Okay. And we want to avoid a red.
So do you think the people in office, David, do they have the political will to make these choices and do the things that need to be done? And I mean, we can't even, we're still trying to figure out what a woman is here and a man is here. I'm like, why are we talking about this when, the well-being, our livelihood of being the greatest country in the world, living some of the wealthiest people in the world is at stake. It's mind-blowing to me.
We have something that the founders never intended. We have a republic that is not representative of nor responsive to the general public. We have a disproportionate share of people who are in elected office who are career politicians. It was never intended for this to be a job and a career. It was intended for people to come out of the real world with various occupations, do temporary public service, and then go back into the real world, if you will. Our founders also were very skeptical of political parties. They were concerned that the duty of loyalty to party might trump the duty of loyalty to countries. We've got a situation where everybody's focused on the next election rather than the next generation. The margins between the majority and minority are very small. And so as a result, that exacerbates partisanship. We've got a situation where only about 30 to 40 seats in the House of Representatives out of 435 are truly competitive, which means that the races are decided in the primaries. In many cases, they're closed party primaries with very low turnouts, which means that people on the extremes of each party have a disproportionate influence on who the nominees are going to be. And right now we've got a situation where both parties to a great extent have been taken over by what I call the wingnuts. The Democrats have been taken over by the far left. The Republicans have been taken over by the far right, whereas 60% roughly of the country is in what I call the sensible center. Center right, center left, more right than left, but we're largely unrepresented. And that's where the compromises are done. The compromises are done. And even Reagan, I was a Reagan presidential appointee, Bush 41 presidential appointee, Clinton presidential appointee, and I've had position in every administration, full or part-time, but one since Reagan. And we used to be able to compromise to get things done, but now you can't even fund the government.
It's crazy. It really is just crazy. And we're blaming, Schumer's blaming Trump and Trump's blaming Schumer. And, it's mind boggling. And the whole point is that, the government's a business. Okay. And business decisions are business decisions, and it shouldn't be about political affiliation or anything like that. It's the well-being of the country. And it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, the well-being of the country is good for you.
Well, the truth is, if the government was a business, it'd be out of business. But let me tell you.
That's a very good point.
But let me give you some numbers that your listeners, I think, or viewers might be able to relate to. When you talk about trillions and tens of trillions or hundreds of trillions, people have no idea what you're talking about. So let me kind of convey some numbers that people might be able to relate better to. These are based upon the official financial statements of the U.S. government for the year ended September 30, 2024. And all I did was take 8 zeros off the numbers. All right. So if you take the official numbers of the U.S. government financial statements, you eliminate 8 zeros. All right. And if Uncle Sam was a person, here's what you get. Uncle Sam made $50,000, but Uncle Sam spent $74,000. So he's in the hole $24,000 for 1 year. He's got $1,240,000 of liabilities and unfunded promises. He's only got $57,000 in assets. So he's got a negative net worth of $1,183,000. Who's going to lend money to Uncle Sam? That's what the financial statements look like by just merely dropping 8 zeros. And it's getting worse every year. Now, the U.S. government is not a business. The U.S. government is not an individual, but the U.S. government is not exempt from the laws of prudent finance, and nobody's going to bail out America. We got to solve our own problem.
That's right. We're the reserve currency of the world, right? We got to solve our own problems.
Primary reserve currency in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's really interesting to me because we're talking about like a default, right? And
not a default, first,
a debt crisis.
Yeah, debt crisis. A lot of people don't understand there's only one thing guaranteed by the Constitution financially, only one. And that's U.S. government debt. All right. So U.S. government is guaranteed by but nothing else is. Social Security's not, Medicare's not, Medicaid's not, civilian and military pensions, retiree health care, that's not. Nothing else is guaranteed by the Constitution. And so therefore, when people say we're going to default on our debt, no, we're not. Okay.
Okay. It's good enough.
Some other obligations. We're not going to default on our debt, but we do have to make tough choices on the spending and revenue side, to be able to get debt as a percentage of the economy, debt to GDP, down to a reasonable and sustainable level over the next 10 to 15 years. That's the right metric, debt to GDP.
While we're on this topic here for a minute, I mean, if the debt continues, right, any future accumulation of debt you've mentioned in the past have been basically forward-looking tax increases. All right. And so, is there a situation, is there an ideal tax regime that you see to help, assuming that the spending is somewhat under control? Is there a tax regime that would need to match the under control spending, and do you have an idea of what that looks like?
Well, first, spending's not under control. Spending is total out of
assuming it would be under control, trying to save the country.
My personal view is everything on the spending side should have a cap. All right. We shouldn't write blank checks except for two things. Number one, Social Security. We can figure out the numbers and make that work. You don't need to have a cap. You can make it work. Okay. Secondly, interest. It can't have a cap. We got to pay whatever the market says we got to pay. But everything else, including healthcare, ought to have a cap. You can't write a blank check for healthcare. It'll bankrupt you. Okay. On the revenue side, from an intellectual standpoint, the best tax system would be a progressive consumption tax. It would be to move away from income taxation and do a progressive consumption tax. But one of the things that you have to consider in any kinds of fiscal reforms is something called political feasibility. Can it pass the House? Can it pass the Senate? Can you get the signature of the president? And there's a lot of ideas out there that, might sound good and might have intellectual merit, but if they're not politically feasible, you're wasting your time to talk about it. And that includes things like, a flat tax, where the numbers don't come close to working. That includes things like converting Social Security to a defined contribution plan, which is more of an investment approach rather than a social insurance. Those things just aren't politically feasible. And so I don't spend a whole lot of time on them.
Okay. So let's look at that progression consumption tax. So are you saying that if I make $100,000 a year and I spend, 60 and save 40, is it based on if I spend 60,000 a year and I pay a tax on that, or
you're paying based upon what you consume, but it would be a progressive. And so the rate wouldn't necessarily be the same for everything that you consume. Certain goods, the rate might be a lot higher than basic essentials, if you will. Right. Okay. For example, if you end up buying a luxury car, you're going to pay a higher rate than if you buy a Yugo.
Right.
Buy a Yugo now, but
yeah, you can't. That's true. I do remember the Yugo back in the day, though, for sure.
Wouldn't be running very long anyway.
All right. So, do you see an avenue, Dave, where that progressive consumption tax system becomes a reality?
Not at the present time. I think what you're more likely to see is broadening the tax base, because we lose 1.8 trillion a year in deductions, exemptions, credits, and exclusions. So to simplify the tax code, to eliminate a lot of those deductions, exemptions, tax, and exclusions, to try to keep the tax rates as low as possible. Depending upon how low the tax rate would be, there'll be consideration on taxation of capital gains, whether capital gains should be taxed the same. Keep in mind, on capital gains, you don't pay social insurance taxes on that. You do wages and earn income. There'll be reconsideration with regard to estate taxes and or wealth taxes because of the tremendous divide between the haves and the have-nots in this country. We have increasing divides between those who are well off and those who aren't well off, if you will. And so I think you're not likely to get as dramatic a change. There is a lot of talk about a value-added tax, as to whether or not there should be some consideration to a value-added tax. But that's a supplement to, not a substitute for, other forms of taxation. What I do know is that the problem is primarily a spending problem. And so most of the gap is going to have to get closed there. But we are going to have more revenues, and you're not going to get it through economic growth. Anybody who tells you that we're going to get it through economic growth alone would fail math. Do we want more economic growth? Yes. Can economic growth help? Yes. But the math doesn't work to say that we're going to grow our way out of this problem, primarily because of demographics, healthcare costs, and interest costs.
It's interesting. So, what was your take on the DOGE? I was super hopeful, I had a lot of good thoughts. Yeah. Doge, it was supposed to be one of these things. Go ahead and find the fat, trim the fat out, that sort of thing. I'd love to get your take on it.
Well, first, Doge didn't do what needed to be done, and they didn't do it the right way. Okay. Doge ended up wanting to, employ artificial intelligence in existing government information systems to try to be able to identify possible or probable fraud, waste, abuse, or mismanagement. It's very clear that Elon Musk, as bright as he is, and as much respect as I have for him, didn't really understand how government operates. For example, a lot of the government information systems are based on COBOL programming. I'm sure he's not familiar with COBOL programming, which is one of the and I don't want to be familiar with COBOL, which is one of the reasons that he said his people told him that we're paying benefits to people 150 years old. No, we're not. Okay. The other thing that I don't think he realized is only Congress can cut spending. You can cancel contracts, you can cancel grants, but only Congress can cut spending, and you have to ask for a rescission. They have to approve, they have to act on it, or else you got to spend the money on something else. But they did figure out later on that the only thing that you can guarantee to cut spending is hiring freezes and reductions in force. But how you go about doing that matters, because you don't want to undercut essential public services. You don't want to end up causing a huge human capital crisis, the ability to be able to do the work that needs to get done on a going forward basis. What we need to do, candidly, Ryan, is something I've been advocating for many years, and that is step back and say, what should the federal government do versus state and local government versus the private not-for-profit sector versus individuals, all right? Because it's gone way beyond what was intended for it to do, all right? Keep in mind the states create the federal government, not the other way around. Secondly, what is it trying to accomplish, and how should it measure success in outcome-based terms? It doesn't have that now, okay? It just throws money at problems, all right? How do you modernize its management, information, human capital, and other systems, all right? If you do that, you can then engage in a very comprehensive devolution of activities to lower levels of government, partnerships, public-private partnerships. You can focus your energy and efforts on what works and what doesn't work, and you end up generating a hell of a lot higher productivity and a lot more savings than anything that's been done so far. That's what needs to be done. I was hopeful that that's what Doge was going to do. That's not what they did, but that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, it is interesting. I had a lot higher hopes, but you're right. I mean, the Congress controls spending, and if you don't stop the spending, that's the bleeding. It doesn't do any good, right? It can certainly help some.
Yeah, they claim that they saved $190 billion. In reality, they saved a small fraction of that because of the reasons that I articulated, right? They were well-meaning. I mean, they were well-meaning, and there are some lessons to be learned. I mean, the inspectors general, the Government Accountability Office, and others, ought to be able to learn from Doge and basically do more continuous auditing using artificial intelligence, which can help. But in order to make big economies and efficiencies, you have to do what I said, and hopefully eventually it will get done.
So, David, a lot of the people that I serve at Allied Wealth, they have bought into the 401k plan, which was introduced into the Internal Revenue Code back in 78, made live, I think, in 1980. And they, defined contribution and benefit plans are long gone, thing of the past. And people are taught today.
Defined benefit are gone.
Yeah, defined benefit plans.
In the government.
Correct. They're still here. Right?
Big time.
And so the defined benefit plans are gone, which are pensions, by the way, and they're replaced by the 401k. So now America is saving the money it's going to use to finance its ideal lifestyle in their golden years, or its golden years, in what I call a tax infested retirement account, right? Because every dollar that comes out is 100% taxable at ordinary income tax rates in a situation where the U.S. government's debt climbs every day. And if we know that, the debt is paid and the expenditures of the government's paid through tax revenue, what do we tell folks? I mean, we're looking at higher tax bills. All our money's in these retirement accounts. Every dollar that comes out is taxable. What do we say to retirees these days?
Most people told me and people in my generation that you were going to pay a lower effective tax rate when you're retired than when you're working. Now, I'm talking about income tax rate, okay? Obviously, when you're retired, if you don't have earned income, then you're not paying social insurance taxes, all right? So you have that. But with
your FICA and Medicare.
Right. But with regard to the income tax rate, we were told you're going to pay a lower effective tax rate. Based on the trajectory that we're on now, that's not going to be the case, okay? Because we've been living beyond our means, because we've been running large deficits, accumulating huge debt burdens, and because you can't solve the problem solely through growth or through spending reductions, you're going to have more revenues. All right. The other challenge that we have is over 40% of individuals who file income tax returns pay zero income tax. Over 40%. And about 20% of the people who file individual income tax returns get a rebate. Not only do they not pay, they get money back from the government because of the earned income tax credit, child care tax credit. What's going to happen is more people are going to have to pay something, and the wealthy is going to have to pay more, but the effective tax rates over time are going to have to go up. Now, there's different ways of doing that. Reduced deductions, exemptions, credits, and exclusions. For example, one of the biggest tax preferences in the Internal Revenue Code is you don't pay payroll or income tax on employer-provided and paid health care. It's hundreds of billions of dollars a year. That is not going to be able to be continued, okay? Because it disassociates the true cost of health care from the individual. It helps them desensitize them from the true cost of health care. So bottom line is the effective tax rate's going to go up. We can debate how and how much, but it's going to go up. It's got to. It's just simple math.
Yeah, it does. And that's scary. So, are you a fan of
one reason why I'm slowly converting, my IRA money?
This is where I was going next. So thanks for saying that.
I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm doing that.
So you're converting your IRA money over to Roth IRA.
Correct.
And do you feel like you're doing that right now because taxes are on sale compared to where they'll be in the future?
Well, you can say on sale. I'm saying lower than what words matter.
They do. They do.
Consider taxes to be on sale. It's not exactly something that I wanted to do It's something that I had to do.
And I agree with you. It's, when's the best time to pay taxes? And it's when the least amount of taxes possible you can pay, right? At the lowest rates. But we do a lot with Roth IRA conversion strategies based on this, because I'm very concerned that, I'm very pro-America, thinks this is the greatest country in the world by a mile, but I'm super concerned the stuff that you're talking about needs to be done. It's just not gonna get done. It's scary.
Look, we live in the greatest country in the history of mankind, but we're not as great as we think we are. We do not learn from history. We do not learn from others. We are not exempt from the laws of prudent finance. We are mortgaging the future of our country, our children, grandchildren, and future generations. That's irresponsible. It's unethical. It's immoral. It needs to stop. And so we have two responsibilities as citizens. We need to put pressure on our elected officials to start making the tough choices sooner rather than later so that we can avoid a debt crisis. And secondly, we have a responsibility to ourselves and our families to be able to do what we can to engage in our own activities to make sure that our finances are put in order and to do effective tax planning, estate planning, and other types of activities that we can control. But we've got to be more involved in trying to help put pressure on the politicians to defuse this ticking bomb so it doesn't go off.
Yeah, it's interesting too. We talk about tax planning and estate planning under the Secure Act. I was pretty surprised to see them do what they did. They pushed the RMD age out to 75, 73, 74, now 75, right? But then on the backside of that, it sounds good. But now when your heirs inherit your IRAs, which is a large part of the wealth in America, by the way, they've got 10 years to liquidate those IRAs.
Right.
It seems like to me that's a tax grab.
No, well, the government tends to, historically what they've done is they've done what they can to maximize short-term revenues and not care about the future. Okay. And frankly, that's how the Roth IRA was created. The Roth IRA was created because, you didn't get a deduction. So that meant the federal government got more revenues in the short term and they don't worry about tomorrow. Okay. I guess it's like, Gone with the Wind, I'll worry about that tomorrow or something. Right. But, unfortunately, tomorrow will ultimately come.
That it will. Dave, what about crypto? What's your takes on the Bitcoin and Ether and I know there's some ones out there that I wouldn't even say the names of on the show, but I mean, what's your take on crypto? Is it viable? Is it here to stay? Is it phony? I mean,
people want to do that as a percentage of their overall portfolio. That's their own business. I'm not a crypto fan because I think it's more gambling than it is anything else. But the other reason that I'm concerned about crypto is there's a lot of illegal activity that is done through crypto that bothers me. Okay, rather than going the crypto route, I've done more with regard to gold, silver, and other assets that are tangible that tend to be a hedge against inflation, but they also tend to be a hedge against fiat currencies. Because that's what we have, a fiat currency.
And what is a fiat currency?
It's a currency that's only as good as the promise to pay. There's nothing.
That's right.
It.
It's money because the government said it's money.
The government said it's money, and because you can exchange it for goods and services, but there's nothing backing it other than the full faith and credit of the United States government, which used to be considered the most solid investment on earth, but I'm not so sure that it is today.
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine, Chad Robichaux, runs a podcast as well called The Resilient Show, and he's a military guy, and it's a lot about military stuff. But part of being resilient is having your financial house in order. And I was on the show, and I held one of these up, and I said, I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, purple, blue, female, male, you should be concerned about what's going on with the economy and the debt, because your wealth is denominated in this. And if this means nothing, all that you've worked for and created is worth nothing.
This is a $100 trillion Zimbabwe bill.
I've been there and I've seen that bill, by the way.
Probably worth not more than about $5, but But it's, look, we must, and I hope and pray that we will take the steps to put our finances in order. But it won't happen unless the first three words of the Constitution come alive. We the people. We are responsible and accountable for what does or does not happen in Washington. Washington is out of touch. Washington is out of control with regard to our finances. They've been that way for at least 20 years, no matter which political party controlled the Congress, no matter which political party was in the White House. The numbers are clear and compelling. We need to get our elected officials to change course before it's too late.
And we need to change them out. There shouldn't be career politicians, and I agree with that wholeheartedly.
I'm for a constitutional amendment that limits how much debt we can take on as a percentage of the economy, absent extremely limited and extraordinary temporary circumstances. Secondly, for 12-year term limits, okay, for campaign finance reform. All three of those will take constitutional amendments. And the only way they're going to happen is if the states exercise their rights under Article 5 of the Constitution, because the Congress isn't going to do it. And the founders were very bright and recognized that the states needed to have that option. And here's what's surprising. The not-for-profit that I chair, the Federal Fiscal Sustainability Foundation, people can find out more at ffsf.us. We discovered over 5 years ago that there were enough state applications for a convention to propose a fiscal responsibility amendment under Article 5 in 1979 for 25 years and as recently as 2017, and the Congress did nothing.
Wow.
This has been confirmed on Constitution Day this year. We're now waiting on Congress to act. If they fail to act, the states are going to need to sue. And if Congress doesn't ultimately act, this will be a real constitutional crisis.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm just, again, I'm hopeful. It's an uphill fight in a big way. Dave, let's switch over here a little bit and talk about retirement. Okay. I mean, is it possible to live the American dream and have a great retirement in this country anymore? I mean, where we're dependent upon Medicare, we're dependent upon Social Security. Is it possible?
Not without planning and discipline. Okay. I mean, and there are generational differences. My parents taught me plan, save, invest, preserve, get out of debt as quickly as possible. Okay. And that's what I did. And so from my own standpoint, I try to practice what I preach. I'm not wealthy, but I'm fine. Okay. Because I spent half my life in public service, and you don't maximize your income and net worth by being in public service if you're honest. And I can assure you I'm honest. Okay.
There's a few people out there I could say that to, by the way, that
there's a lot that can't say that, right? I mean, you wonder how these people become so wealthy when they make $178,000 a year. I mean, but anyway, that's a different story.
You heard it from Dave Walker, not me, folks.
But what I did was I got out of debt as quickly as possible. I had a budget. I stuck with the budget. All right. Well, during the times of my life where I really needed to have that. Okay. I saved, I invested, I preserved for retirement. The first thing I did was to make sure that I had adequate streams of income for myself and my wife throughout retirement. And I've done that through various types of annuities. Okay. And then the rest that I have is gravy, that we can use for, during our lifetime or for charities or for family or whatever else. And so I don't worry, on a day. I don't worry about what the market does on a day-to-day basis. I don't,
so are you in that situation? So you would consider yourself to be semi-retired now, right?
I mean, I don't work for anybody. I'm very, very busy, but
right. That's why I said semi, because
right, yeah.
But so you feel like your financial peace of mind, so to speak, right now, not relied upon the stock market, is because of the annuity income that you have?
Right. Right.
Interesting. Okay.
And I've got something you can't get anymore. Okay. Keep in mind, Social Security was intended to be a floor of income, like a foundation to a house. You have to build on it to have a habitable dwelling, right? And we have too many people that think that they're supposed to retire on Social Security. You shouldn't, okay? And so it's supposed to be supplemented with employer-sponsored pension or the 401k plans, and then personal savings, right? So I recognize that. Social Security is indexed to inflation, all right? I have 3 annuities, one of which is fully indexed to inflation. I don't think you can buy that anymore, okay? Another of which is indexed 3% a year, no matter what the inflation rate is. Since the target rate is 2%, for the most part, that would be adequate if we put our finances in order. And then I have another one that's not indexed for inflation. So, between just those 3 sources of income, forget about, minimum distributions, forget about, investment income. We got more than enough to be able to have a good quality of life throughout our entire life. Okay. So that gives me the ability to not have to worry about that. I'm not going to outlive my savings. And so I've got an adequate stream of income. So then I just have to think about what am I doing with the rest?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I know you,
including the tax aspect.
The tax part is super important, both for spending now, RMDs, and also inheritance as well.
Right.
I know a while back, we followed this closely, the financial advisory community. You were with Fisher, right? Investments and pulled out of there. And, and that was wildly public, by the way, in the financial advisory community. And so what did that experience teach you about picking the right advisor or investment philosophy for uncertain times?
The problem that I had was they say they're different, okay? And they say, they make money when their clients make money. Well, they have the standard fee. I mean, their standard fee is they get paid a certain percent of whatever the assets are. And it's true, if the assets go up, they'll make more money. If the assets go down, they make less money. They still make money, all right? What I got concerned about is they have a standardized portfolio. They have a standardized portfolio I started looking in the portfolio, and they had some stocks that obviously did well. They had others that were just dogs, and they just stuck with the dogs. And I said, well, how are you? You're not really what you say you are, okay? That's the frustration that I had. They act like they're very individualized. And that their fee structure is very different than anybody else. That's not really true. So, I'm not saying that they're not an option that people ought to consider. I'm just saying in my circumstance, I didn't think they were what they said they were. And they were not responsive to inquiries with regard to, questioning what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so I did what I did.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, and I appreciate you sharing that personal experience, by the way, David. It means a lot. What do you think from a retirement standpoint, over the next 10, 15 years, what are some threats to retirees and being able to live a good quality of life in their golden years?
Well, first understand that by law, Social Security can only pay benefits from the assets in the trust fund. The trust fund are projected to go to zero at the end of 2032. If Congress doesn't do anything, there's a 24% cut across the board in everybody's benefits. Okay. Secondly, there's a similar issue on Medicare Part A, which is hospital insurance. Less cut, but significant cut. The bigger problem is what we've been talking about is if we don't put our finances in order, we could end up having a debt crisis. That in addition to much higher tax rates could end up driving inflation, could end up being, result in economic stagnation, and further decline in the value of the dollar. So there's just, I think that's the bigger issue, if you will. And that's the one that I think needs to be our top priority. We need to put our finances in order because while we have other problems, if we don't put our finances in order, quite frankly, these other problems aren't going to be as big of things to worry about because we're going to have much bigger things to worry about.
Yeah, it really is scary. I think a lot of people look at the inflation part of it and don't realize the taxation that would be forced as well. And just the double whammy and, of inflation being driven by this and taxation going up at the same time. I mean, your dollars could just, like the $1 trillion bill you've got from Zimbabwe right there, right? I mean, that's literally what $1 trillion.
$100 trillion.
100 trillion. Yeah, it's funny. We talk about this all the time. So you're trying to put it in perspective a minute ago, but the difference between a million seconds and a billion seconds. Have you heard this one?
Yeah, go ahead. The viewers probably haven't.
A million seconds is about 2.5 weeks, and a billion seconds is 32.5 years. And I don't even know what a trillion second is. Probably 32,000 years, I guess.
Well before Christ.
Indeed. Well, David, what's an action item that retirees can do today to protect their financial future?
Well, the first thing you do is you have to plan, save, invest, preserve, get out of debt, consider the tax aspects, of whatever your retirement income is. Make sure you got a budget that includes things like savings, that includes things like charitable contributions, that considers taxes. Believe it or not, a lot of people, they have budgets and they don't consider those things, and they really need to do that. You need to be more informed and involved with regard to what the true state of America's finances are. You need to put a lot more pressure on your elected officials to start diffusing this ticking debt bomb so we don't all suffer, a cataclysmic event in the future. Those are just a few thoughts off the top of my head. I lay out in my latest book, and I'm not a book salesman, but at american2040.com, where we've been, where we are, where we're headed, how we compare to others, and some of the kinds of things that are going to have to be done to put our finances in order that received broad-based support from the American people. So people may want to check that out.
Interesting. And then, what's your take on these tariffs? Do you think we get anywhere at all with these? Are they a waste of time? Is it
Well, my personal view is you should only use tariffs in circumstances designed to protect national security, public health, or to deal with unfair trade practices. Okay. I'm generally for free and fair trade absent those three circumstances. In the case of the tariffs that we have now, they're generating a lot more revenue, but a small fraction of what we need to deal with the huge deficits that we face. In addition to that, the Supreme Court is going to have to decide which ones will stay and which ones won't. I think you differentiate between ones that have been negotiated. I think the ones that have been negotiated obviously should be upheld because they were a two-way negotiation between two independent parties. The ones that the president imposed unilaterally, which were not reciprocal tariffs, by the way, despite the fact that that's how they were represented, I think are in question, and may not be ruled as being constitutional. I doubt that the Supreme Court would require us to repay it, but they would stop that going forward. And so whatever revenue we're getting from that going forward would be gone. The other thing is that we'll have to see how it plays out on inflation. I mean, it's facts and circumstances, as to whether and to what extent the additional cost associated with tariffs are passed on, in consumer prices, and or absorbed, by the corporate entities that are having to pay, the tariffs, because the importer is the one that has to end up paying the tariffs, and then they have to decide whether they're going to pass that on through prices or whether they're going to absorb it in their profit margin. They'll also try to look for alternative sources that have less tariffs or no tariffs, and obviously to the extent that things that are produced in the United States, they wouldn't be subject to tariffs, and therefore that's one of the reasons that the president's trying to push for more onshoring of activities, and to be able to get more things done in the United States, and to a certain extent, that's proving to be successful. But so the jury's out, but understand that high tariffs are not something that are desirable. we're not going to solve our financial problems with tariffs. Believe it or not, the federal government used to be funded primarily through tariffs until the income tax was adopted. But the world's a very different place than it was in 1913, a totally different place. In 1913, the federal government was only 3% of the economy. So total federal spending was 3% of the economy. Now it's 24%, wow, growing. Okay? So, it's a totally different, we're in a totally different situation today, both domestically and internationally than we were in 1913.
It's unprecedented times.
Yep.
It is. Do you think Trump makes any headway in the next 3 years, 3.5 years we got left here?
Well, look, people may or may not like Trump, but Trump was very clear about what he wanted to do. And he's doing everything he can to get it done. And he's been successful internationally with regard to, resolving a lot of conflicts. He's trying to do what he can to right size government. But I will tell you that he needs to come out for two things. He needs to publicly come out for a statutory fiscal commission that will engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, set the table for a tough up or down vote in Congress on spending and revenues. And he needs to come out for a constitutional amendment through the Article 5 process. Those are the only two things that will help us avoid a debt crisis. Those are the only two things that will help us restore and sustain fiscal sanity over time. And those could be big legacy issues for him. He probably doesn't want those to get in the way of the midterms, but they don't have to. They can be done and report and get resolved after the midterms, but they need to be done, and he needs to come out and publicly support them.
And President Trump, when you watch this, I hope you listen to Dave Walker. Well, Dave, we're about out of time, my friend. Is there anything else any other wisdom you want to impart on us before we go?
We live in a great country, but we're not as great as we think we are. We're not exempt from the laws of prudent finance. We, the people, need to put pressure on our elected officials to start making tough choices sooner rather than later. Help save your country, to keep America great, not to make it great. It's already great. We want to keep it great, but do what you can to protect yourself and your own families through people that you trust. Independent financial investment advisors, et cetera. That's it.
Well, Dave Walker, the man himself. Sir, I cannot thank you enough for being on the podcast. Like I said, when we started out, I followed your work for years. I appreciate the fight you're fighting and all the good you're doing. Please keep it up, sir.
Happy to do it, Ryan. You take care.
Subscribe to Redefine Retirement on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.